The Committee on Oversight and Reform chamber hummed with low, expectant murmurs. Senators flipped through documents, exchanging brief, hushed remarks, adjusting their microphones with measured precision. But before we get started, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The room was packed, a sea of media representatives from C-SPAN, CNN, Fox News, and more, all broadcasting live. A large screen boldly displayed the session title, Special Hearing, Investigating Immigration Fraud and Allegations Against Ilhan Omar at the forefront. Chairman Marcus Russell, a man whose very presence commanded attention, adjusted his glasses and struck his gavel with deliberate force. The sharp sound silenced the chatter instantly. He leaned forward, his stern gaze sweeping across the assembled lawmakers before locking onto the camera, broadcasting his every word to a nationwide audience, a nation holding its breath. This hearing of the House Committee on Oversight and Reform is now in session, he declared, his voice steady and authoritative, each word carrying the weight of the moment. Today we gather to address grave allegations that Representative Ilhan Omar engaged in immigration fraud by marrying her own brother. A ripple of murmurs swept through the chamber, a wave of shock and disbelief. Cameras panned over the faces of lawmakers, some stone-faced, others raising eyebrows or frantically flipping through prepared statements. Chairman Russell's tone sharpened, his voice cutting through the rising tension. We live in a fast-moving world where the news cycle churns relentlessly. Stories vanish, issues are forgotten. But some matters, ladies and gentlemen, must never be swept under the rug. His eyes flickered toward Representative Omar, who sat composed, arms crossed, her face inscrutable, yet radiating a quiet, defiant resolve. Lifting a thick file, he slammed it onto the desk with a resounding slap that echoed through the chamber, a physical manifestation of the gravity of the situation. This is not a new story, he stated firmly, his voice resonating with controlled anger. These allegations have been circulating for years, yet no serious investigation has ever ensued. Leaning back, he clasped his hands together, the atmosphere in the chamber tightening, a coiled spring ready to unleash. The cameras then captured a striking figure. Caroline Leavitt, her eyes sharp and focused like a honed blade, ready to strike. Nearby, Ethan Caldwell, a former immigration official, sat quietly, exuding the quiet confidence of someone holding potentially damning evidence. While Abdi Hakim Osman, representing the Somali community, clenched his hands in anticipation, his knuckles white, bracing himself for what promised to be explosive testimony. Chairman Russell picked up a sheet of paper, adjusted his microphone, and turned his full, unwavering attention to Representative Omar. Representative Omar, he began deliberately, each syllable hanging heavy in the air. Let's commence. The tension was palpable, every pause laden with significance, a storm brewing on the horizon. At that moment, Caroline Leavitt leaned forward, her manicured fingers drumming lightly on the wooden table before her. A slight, almost imperceptible smirk tugged at the corner of her lips as she adjusted her microphone. Her voice, carrying both amusement and exasperation, broke the silence. You know, it's almost comical how the media seems to remember every single misstep made by conservatives, she began, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Yet when it comes to the left, it's as if someone hits the delete button. She paused, letting her words sink in, a predator toying with its prey. We've been talking incessantly about immigration fraud, mass deportations, the crackdown on illegal crossings. Yet there's something, or someone, that continues to slip through the cracks. With deliberate care, she produced a sheet of paper, flipped it for effect, then set it back down. Twitter has noticed, she stated, her voice a low, dangerous purr. Her words drew a sharp exhale from the chamber, a collective gasp. She then turned her gaze directly toward Representative Omar, whose expression remained stoic, a mask of defiance. But let's get to the heart of it, she declared, her tone hardening, the steel beneath the velvet glove revealed. Did a sitting member of Congress commit immigration fraud? No more dancing around the issue. The Ilhan Omar scandal speaks for itself. Folding her hands together, her voice dropped slightly, a conspiratorial whisper. I think we all know why that question matters. A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber, a wave of anticipation and dread. The weight of her query pressed down like a storm cloud, leaving the room momentarily suspended, breathless, waiting for the inevitable downpour. Just then, Ethan Caldwell cleared his throat, stepping forward with measured calm, a beacon of reason in the swirling chaos. Mr. Chairman, he said, adjusting his microphone, his voice steady and assured. There have been persistent allegations that Representative Ilhan Omar engaged in immigration fraud. He flipped through his files, a meticulous librarian of incriminating evidence, until he found the necessary document, then raised his eyes. The atmosphere was electric, charged with anticipation, each word, each pause, laden with the promise of revelations. To put it plainly, she is accused of marrying her brother to help him stay in the country by securing a green card. A sharp inhale rippled through the chamber, a collective gasp of shock. A camera zoomed in on Omar's face, yet her expression remained inscrutable, a fortress of secrets. This isn't a new story, Caldwell continued, adjusting his glasses, his voice gaining momentum. These allegations have circulated for years, but now, evidence and footage dating back to 2021 and 2022 have resurfaced. He scanned the room, noting the murmurs among the committee members, the subtle shifts in posture, the barely concealed anxiety. It's going viral again, he observed, a hint of grim satisfaction in his voice. People are beginning to ask, why hasn't this been fully investigated? The hush in the room was nearly suffocating, a heavy blanket of silence. Some lawmakers shifted uneasily in their seats, while others exchanged hushed whispers, their faces etched with concern. Caldwell placed both hands firmly on the table and leaned forward, his voice steady yet insistent. I believe it's time we stop ignoring this. Let's dive into this mess, shall we? The sound of camera shutters clicking punctuated his words, a staccato rhythm underscoring the gravity of the moment, as the hearing took an unmistakable turn. Adjusting his glasses once more, Ethan Caldwell flipped through the pages before him, the rustling of paper the only sound in the room. The room, already tense, grew even more serious. Let's rewind a few years, he said calmly but firmly, tapping his fingers on a stack of documents, a metronome marking the passage of time, leading them back to the genesis of the scandal. These allegations aren't new. When they first emerged, Representative Ilhan Omar dismissed them as absurd, nothing more than conspiracy theories. His eyes flickered toward Omar, who sat stone-faced, her fingers intertwined on the desk, a picture of stoic defiance. Then, Caldwell continued, picking up another document, a scanned copy of a marriage certificate, which he held up for emphasis, a damning piece of evidence displayed for all to see. The media uncovered this wedding certificate, and suddenly, Representative Omar had no response. He set the document down, tapping the top of the page, the sound echoing in the silence. She refused to comment, claiming she does not discuss her personal or family matters. Caldwell paused, letting a deliberate, measured breath fill the room before adding, but then, voices began to speak up. He picked up another file, and glancing at the committee, noted that Abdi Hakim Osman, a respected figure in the Minneapolis Somali community, went on record with the Daily Mail. He read aloud, his voice clear and unwavering. In February 2009, Ilhan Omar married her biological brother, Ahmed Nur Said Elmi, so he could remain in the United States and attend college. A ripple of murmurs spread across the chamber, a wave of disbelief and shock as the gravity of the accusation settled like a heavy fog, obscuring the truth, leaving everyone grasping for clarity. Caldwell leaned back, hands flat on the table, his gaze sweeping across the room. So now, I asked the committee, should we really ignore this story? Silence ensued, a heavy, pregnant silence. The clicking of cameras filled the pause, a relentless soundtrack to the unfolding drama. As the hearing moved into uncharted territory, a dangerous and unpredictable landscape. The tension in the chamber had reached a fever pitch, a palpable force pressing against the walls. Every camera focused on Abdi Hakim Osman, the key witness, the man who held the truth in his hands. He adjusted his microphone, cleared his throat, and straightened his posture with deliberate calm. Osman placed his right hand on a Bible before him and swore in, a solemn oath to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. When he spoke, his voice was firm and measured, each word carrying the weight of conviction. I can confirm without hesitation that Representative Ilhan Omar married her biological brother, Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi, to obtain legal immigration documents in the United States. A sharp inhale rippled through the audience, a collective gasp of shock and disbelief, and the room fell silent. The silence of stunned realization. Osman pressed on, unshaken, his voice unwavering. At that time, Omar was already religiously married to Ahmed Hirsi. But because her marriage wasn't officially recorded under Minnesota state law, she was able to legally wed Elmi on paper. This was not a misunderstanding, it was deliberate, a planned effort to secure a green card for her brother. The weight of his statement hung in the chamber, a heavy, suffocating presence. Marcus Russell watched silently, his face a mask of impassivity, while Caroline Levitt crossed her arms and narrowed her eyes in scrutiny, a predator assessing its prey. Ethan Caldwell nodded slightly, a subtle acknowledgement of the truth, as he flipped through his notes, the architect of the unfolding drama. Then, for the first time since the hearing began, Ilhan Omar leaned forward to speak, her voice icy and controlled, yet laced with indignation, a volcano simmering beneath a veneer of calm. "This is absurd," she said sharply, her voice cutting through the silence like a shard of glass. "We've been through this before. These are baseless accusations, fabricated by those who are either misinformed or have a political agenda." A soft, incredulous laugh escaped her, a sound of disbelief and defiance, as she shook her head. "A so-called witness claims I married my brother, and suddenly that's enough to trigger a congressional hearing? Based on what, gossip, fringe media reports?" She turned to Osman, her expression steely, a challenge in her eyes. "Now, let me ask you this. Where is your proof? Because without evidence, these allegations are nothing more than rumors." Unfazed, Osman tilted his head slightly before replying, a hint of weary patience in his voice. "Proof." He gestured toward the papers in front of him, a mountain of incriminating evidence. The proof the media uncovered years ago. The marriage certificate, the signatures, and first-hand accounts from those who witnessed it. He then produced another document, a record from the Christian minister who officiated the ceremony. Although she refused to comment, insisting on keeping her personal life private, her existence and recollections were undeniable, a silent testament to the truth. A ripple of murmurs passed through the audience, a wave of uncertainty and doubt. Omar's jaw tightened, a flicker of anger in her eyes. Marcus Russell, who had remained silent until now, finally leaned forward, his voice cool and measured, cutting through the rising tension. "We're not here for political theater, Representative Omar. We're here to get to the truth." A brief pause followed. A moment of suspended animation. Omar maintained her gaze, yet the room's energy shifted, the murmurs dying instantly, replaced by a heavy, expectant silence. Russell continued, addressing everyone in the room in a measured, deliberate tone, his voice resonating with authority. "That is quite the accusation." He let his words hang, giving the moment its full weight. Then he turned directly to Omar. "Representative Omar, I understand you have repeatedly denied these claims, calling them absurd, baseless, politically motivated. But let's be clear, denial alone isn't enough. Without solid evidence, these allegations remain mere rumors." A murmur rippled through the crowd, a wave of agreement and anticipation, as Russell let his words settle before continuing. This isn't some tabloid rumor we can simply laugh off. It's a serious allegation that calls into question the integrity of our immigration system, and frankly, the integrity of this institution itself. His eyes turned cold and unwavering, his gaze piercing. If these allegations are true, and you did indeed engage in marriage fraud to secure a green card for your brother, then he should be deported. A sharp reaction rippled from Omar's side, a wave of shock and outrage. Some allies shifted in their seats. Others whispered among themselves, their faces etched with concern. Russell pressed on, his voice relentless. And if you played a role in orchestrating this fraud, then you should face criminal charges. Silence fell. A heavy, suffocating silence. Russell leaned back, his gaze sweeping the room, taking in the expressions of disbelief, anger, and fear. An allegation this serious cannot be ignored. The sound of camera shutters clicking filled the chamber, a relentless rhythm underscoring the gravity of the moment. And the atmosphere grew suffocatingly tense. The hearing had taken a dramatic turn, a descent into the depths of scandal and betrayal. At that moment, Caroline Levitt, who had been waiting patiently, a coiled spring ready to unleash, uncrossed her arms, leaned forward, and let out a short, unimpressed exhale. "You know, Mr. Chairman," she began, her voice laced with sarcasm and irritation, "it's like what we're witnessing here is part of a much bigger problem." She gestured toward the documents on the table, her eyes fixed on Omar, a predator locking onto its prey. "There's a long history of politicians escaping accountability, getting away with actions that would land any regular American in prison." She paused, then shook her head, a gesture of disbelief and disgust. "And if we're talking about politicians getting away with it, well, Hillary Clinton immediately comes to mind." Subtle nods came from her colleagues, a silent chorus of agreement, as she continued. "Remember her email scandal? Running a private server, deleting 33,000 emails under subpoena, and even going as far as bleaching hard drives, smashing phones, destroying evidence." Her expression mixed faux curiosity with barely contained frustration. "And what happened to her?" she pressed, though the answer was obvious. "Nothing." She raised a hand, gesturing vaguely, a dismissive wave. James Comey, former FBI director leading the investigation, even admitted it was extremely careless, but no criminal charges followed. Not a single one. Leaning forward, her voice sharpening, she declared, "And here's the thing, Mr. Chairman. This isn't an isolated incident. It's not just about Hillary Clinton. No, it's a pattern, a systematic behavior that should never be swept under the rug." She turned back to Omar, her eyes narrowing further, a laser beam of scrutiny. "A so-called witness claimed I married my brother, and suddenly that rumor was enough to spark a full congressional hearing. Based on what?" she challenged, her tone icy. "Gossip, fringe media reports." She fixed her steely gaze on Osman. "Where is your proof?" she demanded, her voice a whip cracking through the silence. "Allegations without evidence are nothing but rumors." Osman, unruffled, tilted his head slightly. "Proof," he echoed, a hint of weary patience in his voice. He gestured toward the documents spread before him, a mountain of incriminating evidence. Proof the media uncovered years ago. The marriage certificate, the signatures, the accounts from those present. Then, picking up another file, he revealed a document from the Christian minister who had officiated the ceremony. Though the minister now refused to comment on the matter, her existence and her recollections remained undeniable, a silent testament to the truth. A ripple of murmurs swept through the room, a wave of uncertainty and doubt. Omar's jaw tightened, a flicker of anger in her eyes. Finally, Chairman Russell leaned forward. "We're not here for political theater, Representative Omar," he said coolly. "We're here to get to the truth." He paused, letting his words sink in, a heavy weight settling over the room. "That is quite the accusation," he continued, his tone measured and deliberate, addressing the entire chamber. "Denial alone is not enough. Without solid evidence, these allegations remain mere rumors. He turned his attention back to Omar. Representative Omar, you have repeatedly dismissed these claims as absurd, baseless, and politically motivated. But let's be clear. If these allegations are true that you engaged in marriage fraud to secure a green card for your brother, then your brother should be deported. A sharp reaction rippled from Omar's side, a wave of shock and outrage. Several allies shifted, some shook their heads, while others whispered to aides, their faces etched with concern. Moreover, if you played a role in orchestrating this fraud, you should face criminal charges. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating, in the chamber as Russell leaned back, his eyes sweeping over the assembly, a judge surveying his courtroom. An allegation this serious cannot be swept under the rug. The clicking of camera shutters punctuated the tense silence, a relentless rhythm underscoring the gravity of the moment. What was once casual murmur and side conversation had turned suffocating. The hearing had taken a dramatic turn. At that moment, Caroline Leavitt, who had been waiting patiently, a coiled spring ready to unleash, uncrossed her arms and leaned forward, letting out a short, unimpressed exhale. "You know, Mr. Chairman," she began, her voice laced with both sarcasm and irritation, "what we're witnessing is part of a much larger problem." Gesturing toward the stack of documents before her, her eyes remained fixed on Omar, a predator locking onto its prey. There's a long history of politicians getting away with actions that would land any ordinary citizen in prison. She let her words hang, a pregnant pause filled with unspoken accusations, then shook her head, a gesture of disbelief and disgust. "And if we're talking about politicians getting away with it," she added pointedly, "well, Hillary Clinton comes to mind immediately." A few colleagues nodded subtly, a silent chorus of agreement. "Remember her email scandal? Running a private server out of her home, deleting 33,000 emails under subpoena, even going so far as to bleach hard drives, smash phones, and destroy evidence." Her tone mixed faux curiosity with barely contained frustration. "And what happened to her?" she pressed, though the answer was obvious. "Nothing." She raised a hand, gesturing vaguely, a dismissive wave. James Comey, the former FBI director, admitted it was extremely careless, yet no criminal charges were ever filed. Caroline leaned in once more, her voice sharpening, a blade honed to a razor's edge. "Mr. Chairman, this isn't an isolated incident. It's a pattern. This isn't just about one politician. It's about a systemic failure where denial is the norm, and accountability is selectively applied." Her gaze shifted back to Omar, her expression intensifying, a laser beam of scrutiny. A few chuckles erupted from the Republican side, a ripple of dark amusement. And, for a brief moment, Omar's jaw tightened, a flicker of anger, but she quickly composed herself, a mask of stoic defiance returning to her face. "You act as if this is about justice," she declared coolly, her voice a low, controlled burn. "But let's be honest, it's pure politics. It's about misdirection, about tarnishing my name and my community, and keeping the spotlight off the real issues our country faces." With arms folded and an unyielding glare, she added, "So, no, Representative Leavitt, I have no need to justify my record in Congress to you. The American people did that when they elected me." The chamber stirred, divided. Reactions rippled through the lawmakers, some nodding in agreement, others remaining impassive, their faces unreadable. Before the tension could escalate further, Marcus Russell cleared his throat firmly. "Order," he intoned, his voice cutting through the rising animosity, fixing his gaze on Leavitt. "Representative Leavitt, please proceed with your questions." Leavitt reclined slightly in her chair, a smirk playing at her lips, a predator savoring the moment. "Oh, don't worry, Mr. Chairman," she replied smoothly, her voice dripping with anticipation. "We're just getting started." At that moment, the room dimmed, as the screen behind the committee table flickered to life. A grainy video began to play, and the ambient chatter fell away, replaced by the muffled cadence of a speech. Leaning back, Russell gestured toward the screen. "What you're watching right now," he began, his tone calm yet heavy with implication, "is a clip of Representative Ilhan Omar speaking at an event." The footage rolled on, the words indistinguishable, uttered in Somali. "If you don't speak Somali, you might miss the crucial detail. She isn't pledging allegiance to the United States. She's pledging loyalty to Somalia." A low murmur swept through the chamber, a wave of unease and suspicion, as several lawmakers exchanged looks, while others maintained carefully neutral expressions, their inner thoughts hidden. Caroline Levitt, watching intently, leaned forward and tapped her pen against the desk, a rhythmic beat underscoring the unfolding drama. "Let me get this straight," she stated, her voice laden with incredulity. "We have a sitting U.S. Congresswoman who swore an oath to uphold and defend this country. Yet on camera she declares her allegiance not to America, but to Somalia." A dry, incredulous laugh escaped her, a sound of disbelief and disdain, as she delivered her remark. A few chuckles rippled from the Republican side, a dark echo of her sentiment. "And we're supposed to just ignore that?" she demanded, turning sharply toward Omar, her gaze piercing. "Tell me, Representative Omar, which country do you serve?" The room tensed instantly, every eye fixed on Omar, who sat motionless for a moment, her expression inscrutable, a fortress of secrets. Then, deliberately, she leaned forward. "You know what's fascinating about all of this?" she said, her voice calm and measured, a stark contrast to the rising tension. "You act as if you've uncovered some grand scandal, as if you found the smoking gun proving I'm a foreign operative infiltrating Congress." She folded her hands and shook her head slightly, a gesture of weary amusement. "But here's the reality, Representative Leavitt. That clip, that speech, it wasn't aimed at America's enemies. I was addressing my community, immigrants, refugees, people who have faced real hardship, so encouraging them to take pride in where they come from. Tell me, is that a crime now?" Levitt didn't blink, her gaze unwavering. "No, Representative Omar, but pledging allegiance to another country does raise serious questions about where your true loyalties lie." Omar exhaled sharply and leaned back, a flicker of defiance in her eyes. "So, now I must prove my patriotism to you?" she asked coolly, her voice dripping with sarcasm. She tilted her head, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. "Funny how that standard never seems to apply to some members of Congress," she added, drawing murmurs from the Democratic side, a subtle jab at her accusers. The atmosphere shifted into a cold, tense standoff, a battle of wills and ideologies. Marcus Russell cleared his throat and reasserted control, his voice firm and authoritative. "Representative Omar, this committee isn't here to debate your version of patriotism. We are here to determine whether your actions and words align with the duties of a member of Congress." He then turned to Levitt. "Representative Levitt, please proceed with your questioning." Levitt smiled slightly, a predator pleased with the turn of events. "With pleasure, Mr. Chairman," she replied. And just like that, the hearing plunged deeper into controversy, into questions that few dared to confront, a descent into the heart of darkness. Caroline Levitt let out a low, unimpressed chuckle as she reclined in her chair. The video had ended, yet the tension in the room lingered, a heavy, suffocating presence. "You know, Mr. Chairman," she remarked, her sharp gaze flicking between Omar and the Democratic members of the committee. "It's getting really hard to take these lectures seriously. We have career politicians who love to wag their fingers at the rest of us. They climb onto their soapboxes preaching morality, patriotism, democracy, while their closets hide countless skeletons." She shook her head, a gesture of disbelief and disgust. "Take Hillary Clinton, for example. She's a masterclass in hypocrisy. She spent years decrying the dangers of Trump supporters, calling them deplorable, Yet, when she was under investigation for running a private email server, deleting 33,000 subpoenaed emails, and even smashing her phones with hammers just to destroy evidence, nothing happened. Not a single charge. And then she turns around and calls us corrupt, her eyebrow arched, a silent question hanging in the air as the weight of her statement settled over the room. "And what about you, Representative Omar?" she challenged, her voice turning sharp, a blade honed to a razor's edge. She does the same thing. Levitt tilted her head slightly, her tone shifting to one that bordered on amusement. She relishes lecturing conservatives, lecturing America on who we are, what we should believe, and how we ought to act. Meanwhile, there are serious allegations of immigration fraud, questionable foreign ties, and anti-American rhetoric surrounding her. And somehow we're expected to be the ones taught a lesson? A few murmurs from the audience, confirming that sentiment. Omar's expression remained neutral, but her fingers tightened subtly along the edge of the desk, a subtle betrayal of her inner turmoil. Levitt continued, her voice dripping with disdain. "And let's not forget, these are the very people who scream about democracy, about norms, about respecting institutions. Yet when it comes time for them to act," she laughed mockingly and shook her head. Trump didn't attend Biden's inauguration, didn't welcome the Bidens to the White House, and didn't help with the transition, as every other outgoing president had done. And the Democrats, the very ones who claimed to stand for civility, decided he didn't deserve any of that. No respect, no dignity, nothing. But now they want to stand here and tell us how to behave? She gestured vaguely, leaning back again. "So, no, Mr. Chairman, I don't think we have to sit here and take this. I don't think we need to nod along when people like Representative Omar rise to lecture us about morality, about patriotism, about what it means to be American. Because, quite frankly, I think we have a much better idea than she does." A sharp silence filled the room, a moment of suspended animation. Then, Omar leaned forward slightly, her expression controlled, but her tone biting sharply. "You know what's really fascinating, Representative Levitt," she said, her voice dangerously calm, a viper coiling to strike. Levitt arched an eyebrow, a silent challenge, waiting. "It's how people like you love to talk about hypocrisy, but only when it suits your narrative." She tilted her head slightly, her gaze laced with mocked curiosity. "Because if we're going to air out skeletons in closets, I think we should take a good hard look at your side of the aisle, too." A few murmurs arose from the Democratic side, a wave of anticipation and support. Omar folded her hands together, her gaze unwavering. "You lecture me about loyalty. You question my place in this country. But let's talk about the party that for years enabled corruption, conspiracy theories, and outright criminality under the Trump administration. You want to talk about undermining democracy? Then let's talk about members of your own party who pushed the idea that the election was stolen, without a shred of evidence." She let out a soft, incredulous laugh, shaking her head, a gesture of disbelief and disdain. "You don't care about hypocrisy, Representative Levitt. You just care about power." Levitt's smile was razor-sharp, a predator baring its teeth. "You're right about one thing, Representative Omar. This is about power. Because power belongs in the hands of the American people, not in the hands of politicians who think they're untouchable." Another sharp silence fell, another battle line drawn, another layer of the conflict exposed. Marcus Russell let the last exchange settle. The tension in the chamber was thick, a palpable weight pressing against the walls. He scanned the room, taking in the expressions of his fellow committee members, some impassive, some agitated, others quietly observing, waiting for the next move. Then, slowly and deliberately, he leaned forward, adjusting the microphone. In front of her. Maybe some people think this is nothing. Just political theater. Another viral headline destined to fade away, he said, his voice low and measured, yet carrying the weight of authority. He let his words hang in the air, his gaze flicking toward Omar, and then to the Democratic committee members. But here's the thing. We don't determine truth by ignoring accusations, and we don't decide what's real by looking the other way and hoping people forget. A few nods came from the Republican side, while the Democrats remained stoic, their expressions unreadable. Russell exhaled sharply, tapping his fingers against the table, a rhythmic beat underscoring the gravity of the moment. So, I'll say this plainly. Perhaps some of you in this room think this is a joke, but let me remind you, immigration fraud is not a joke. When a high-profile politician stands at the center of these allegations, the American people deserve to know the truth. His voice grew firmer, cutting through the room like a gavel striking wood. This committee has a duty, not to a party, not to a narrative, but to the law, to the American people. He glanced down, flipping through his notes one last time before setting them aside, then looked up, his gaze sweeping across the room. Which is why, today, I am officially recommending that this committee open a formal investigation into the allegations against Representative Ilhan Omar. The room erupted, a cacophony of sound, some in agreement, others in protest. Voices overlapped, and aides whispered furiously. Reporters in the back typed frantically into their laptops, chronicling the unfolding drama. Omar remained still, her fingers interlaced on the table, her jaw tight. A picture of stoic defiance. Caroline Leavitt smirked, folding her arms, clearly satisfied with the turn of events, a predator who had successfully cornered its prey. Russell raised a hand, calling for order, his voice cutting through the chaos. This hearing is adjourned. The sound of the gavel striking wood was final, deafening, and unavoidable, and just like that, the investigation had begun. In the aftermath, the halls of Congress buzzed with speculation and political maneuvering, a hive of activity. News outlets dissected every moment, every exchanged glance, every phrase weaponized for political gain. On cable news, pundits battled to control the narrative, some calling the hearing a long-overdue reckoning, others decrying it as a politically motivated witch hunt. Social media exploded with debate, with hashtags trending for days. Some calling for justice, others for resistance, all centered around Ilhan Omar. She walked through the corridors of Capitol Hill with a composed face and unwavering posture. She had faced controversy before, had been scapegoated, vilified, and targeted by critics. But this time, the investigation was real, a tangible threat hanging over her head. Reporters shouted questions as she passed. Representative Omar, do you have any response to the committee's decision? She paused briefly, her expression unreadable, a mask hiding her inner turmoil. The truth always prevails, she stated, her voice calm and measured, before stepping into the elevator, the doors sliding shut, leaving the noise of the outside world behind, a temporary sanctuary from the storm. Meanwhile, Caroline Leavitt watched the unfolding coverage from her office, arms crossed and a satisfied smirk playing at her lips, a victor savoring the spoils of war. If you found this analysis thought-provoking, please hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell for more in-depth coverage on today's most pressing issues. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation going. The integrity of our democratic institutions depends on our ability to discern truth from spin, substance from spectacle. Congressional hearings should be tools for accountability, not weapons of political warfare. What are your thoughts on the increasing politicization of congressional hearings? Do you believe they still serve their intended purpose? Share your opinions and insights in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more analysis of critical political issues.